Welcome back to the Girl Out of Order podcast. You are in for such a treat today because I have one of my new forever friends that I cannot wait for you to get to know. We are in our month, 2 months on worthiness, and this podcast could not come at a more perfect time because this woman that I'm going to introduce you to has a journey that very few people have been on, and it's a journey truly of finding her self-worth. But before we dive in, I want to hit you up again. So please, please, please help us get the Girl Out of Order podcast out into the world on a bigger scale. We need your help. Please leave us a 5-star review, a written review on any platform that you listen to your podcast. It would do us so much good. Remember, we want to build as big a tribe of girls out of order as possible so we can truly make this world a better place. And while you're at it, make sure you, if you haven't already, join our Girl Out of Order Facebook community because we have so many exciting things happening in there. We have lives, we have all kinds of inspiration. And like my last podcast said, we need what only you can provide. So let's dive in. I am so excited to welcome Chelsea Alba to the Girl Out of Order podcast. Welcome. You got to speak up a little bit. I couldn't hear you.
Oh, hey.
Hey, girl.
I'm excited to be here.
Oh my gosh. All right. So I'm going to give just a little bit of background on how we met. And then we can dive into your story because your story is so compelling. And I truly believe that women in particular, we learn best and we are changed, I believe, more thoroughly through the process of storytelling. So Chelsea and I, we met literally in paradise in Fiji in September at Tony Robbins' Life and Wealth Mastery event. And I will be really honest, Chelsea. I'm not sure you and I can't remember when we first had our conversation in Fiji. Do
I,
you remember when we first met?
it was when we got the coconut water and we were in the back of the room. We were drinking coconut water together and I was wrapped in a blanket. And I was telling you how I had saw you in Date with Destiny. And we just started chatting and we talked about how you have a daughter named Chelsea and we exchanged numbers and it went from there.
Oh, that's right. Isn't that funny? I think maybe because they were starving us at Life Mastery. Just kidding, not starving us. It was a cleanse, not starving us. But yeah, it was such a fire hose of information. I'm so glad you reminded me because now it's all coming back to me. Yeah, I do have a daughter named Chelsea, which, of course, made you extra special right away, right?
Yes.
So tell our listeners how you found your way to Fiji.
So I found my way to Fiji. I was actually in a very low point in my life. I had gotten out of prison. I had my daughter, and she was about a year and a half old, and I was newly single. And I discovered Tony Robbins through a podcast that I was listening to. And I just started like listening to him on YouTube and further started reading his books, and I decided randomly that I was going to go to UPW, which at the time I could not afford, right? But I was like, you know what? I'm going to go out on a whim and I'm going to buy this ticket. So I went to UPW, and at the end of UPW, they present Master University, and I still at that time had no idea how I was going to pay for it. But I was like, you know what? I have just enough in my bank account and I'm going to put down the down payment and get on the payment plan and figure it out as I go.
So let me jump in real quick because I want to make sure our listeners understand UPW is Unleash the Power Within, which is Tony's signature program, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And what year was that? Do you remember?
That was 2021. So it was the first one after the pandemic.
So we were actually at the same UPW.
Oh, nice.
I don't even know if we knew that.
I don't think so.
Where were you seated?
Oh, I was far in the back in general admission. But I ventured my way up to the front. Where there's a will, there's a way. And not everybody pays attention to your lanyards.
That is absolutely true. I was actually in the overflow room. I was in the power pavilion, they called it. So I wasn't even in general admission. So that's how far back I was.
Well, we were practically in the same boat.
Yes, we were. Okay, so you purchased Mastery University, which for those of you who do not know, is a bundle of programs that Tony Robbins sells. I'm a graduate of Mastery University. Did you graduate?
Yes, I did.
Woo, we're graduates. And so it includes life and wealth mastery, date with destiny, unleash the power within. I don't know if you bought business mastery, but you can add that on. It's an amazing program. So you purchased that in November of 21, which was the same time that I purchased mine.
Yeah, so I purchased that, and then I did Date with Destiny in December. That's the same time that you did Date with Destiny. That's when I was first introduced to you. You did not know that, but that's when I
Nope.
was first met you for the first time. And then as time went on, I just kept chipping away at those payments, and I ended up in Fiji, and it took a little under 3 years, but
Yep.
$50 a week will get you pretty far when you're determined to, get out of the country. And so that's how I made it. And Fiji was a trip that I never even believed that I would be able to take. And I'm really grateful for all the knowledge that I got while I was there, and really just for the opportunity, given my past. It was something that I never dreamed was possible.
Okay, so we're going to unpack Fiji near the end, but I really want to dig into what led you to the place where, because you kind of dropped the bomb a little bit ago that you had just gotten out of prison, and the title of this episode is From Prison to Paradise. So Chelsea, one of the things that, I mean, there's so many things about you that blow my mind. I'm just trying not to get teary because I'm looking at you, because if you're not watching this on YouTube, you should be, but I'm trying not to look at her because I'm going to get teary. But this woman's story is so inspiring. And we are in the month of 2 months of worthiness. And your story is literally like a screenplay on a journey from lack, like no self worth, to where you are now. So, if you would mind giving us some background, because you ended up in prison, you dropped that. So, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about what led you to the point where you made decisions that got you into prison?
Yeah, sure. So, just to give a little background on me, so I'm going to be 35 this year, and I'm from the Philadelphia area. So Philadelphia is known for being having one of the highest opiate rates across the
Mm.
country. So I had a background of doing heroin and other drugs. I got into it after my parents had divorced. Oh, okay, so I got into my addiction after my parents had divorced. I started really just experimenting with drugs, and I didn't have much parental guidance, and I kind of turned into this party girl between ages 16 to 23. I really was just partying and having fun, and running around with the wrong crowd. And at that time, I was selling drugs along with working. And I had gone to a party, and the party went wrong. I had done some drugs with people, and I ended up getting sexually assaulted at the party, which was really the catalyst, and the trauma that struck me that really launched my addiction into a full blown habit. So I went
I want to
from
ask you a question about that, if I may,
go for
because
it.
what you're saying is unfortunately such a familiar experience in the lives of women. You know my story a little bit. I've had sexual trauma in my past. And at Girl Out of Order, we don't shy around the hard stuff, because the hard stuff is part of our stories. And yes, the drugs, the prison is a really big deal, but your self-worth journey led you to a point where you made decisions that made you vulnerable. And then this huge trauma happened, right?
Yeah.
And
And
so take it from there.
yeah, so I when my parents divorced and I didn't have a lot of guidance, I didn't feel lovable.
Mm.
That's a lot of the reason why I partied, because I wanted to escape this feeling of not being lovable or this aloneness. And when I was raped, I feel like that intensified because I did not feel worthy of even good treatment, right, by another human being. And I had been so violated that my self-worth, as low as it already was, plummeted to the floor.
Mm.
To the point where I didn't even see a point in living anymore. After that happened, I had never used heroin before in my life. I was selling it at the time to make ends meet, but I was not using it. And a lot of addicts, when they start using opiates, they start using pills and it grows from there. But I was on a suicide mission at that time. So the first time I ever did heroin was the first time I had ever done an opiate. And I overdosed that day. And I know that God was watching over me. My best friend was my roommate at the time. And she said she got a funny feeling while she was at work. And she came home that day and she found me overdosed on the floor. And lucky enough, the EMTs came and they Narcaned me and they brought me back to life. But even at that point, I was just upset. I was like, why did you save me? Why did you let me live? Because I felt worthless. I felt like I had nobody. So I'm just grateful that God gave me a second chance at life, and God continued to do so time after time after time, because you know what they say, like when God is trying to teach you a lesson, like if you don't get it, he's going to keep teaching you over and over again. And I didn't see how much grace he was giving me in that moment when they brought me back to life, that he was telling me that I was worthy of life and I was worthy of great things. But at the time I was in such a victimhood that I just kept going down the wrong path.
It's so interesting that you'd use that term victimhood. If you remember during the Date with Destiny intervention that Tony did with my husband and I, he called me out on living in a victim mentality. And when we live in that victimhood mentality, whether it's drugs or in my case, and struggles in my marriage and betrayal, it prevents us from truly living into the worthiness that we actually deserve. Not because you've done anything, Chelsea. That's self-confidence, but it's self-worth because you exist. And so when I hear you talk about that, like, yeah, it does lead to these tragic decisions. So what happened from that time that you were revived? What then led to you becoming a prison inmate, if you will?
So a few weeks later, I had cops bust in my front door, and they came in. At this point, I'm now fully using drugs, and they raid my house. They find drugs, and I get arrested on the spot, and I get taken to jail. It was the first time that I had ever really gotten serious trouble. So I got back out on bail and kind of just went back to doing what I was doing, because like I was stuck in that victimhood. So I kind of justified me doing the things I was doing. I felt like I deserved to get high because bad things happened to me. I felt like I deserved to, run around and do bad things because my life wasn't working out the way that I thought it did. So I used my victimhood as an excuse to keep going down this path, which eventually I ended up getting sentenced. It was a light sentence. It was like 3 months in prison with 5 years probation, right? And so I did my couple months in jail and I came home on probation, but I couldn't get my act together. So I kept going back and forth to jail on probation violations over, I'm not passing drug tests. I'm getting caught stealing at stores. So there was a lot of little things that were going on. And when you're in a full-blown addiction to drugs, the most important thing is getting high. So I wasn't always following the law. I was driving under the influence. I got 2 DUIs. So throughout all this, I ended up in prison for the very last time. And I had figured out a way to start getting drugs in jail. So that's how
Okay,
low.
hold on a second. I got to interrupt you. So You had a 3-month jail term, didn't stick, obviously. You're going in and out of jail. What was the prison sentence that you had when you finally were sentenced?
When I was finally sentenced at my very last time, I was sentenced to 3 to 5 years.
That's a really long time.
Yeah, and it was actually a probation violation because I had gotten caught getting high in jail. They couldn't
Oh,
charge me with something new, but they changed my probation sentencing. So they changed my original sentence to the 3 to 5 years, and I went to state prison instead of a county prison.
and that's a
Where
different ball game, right?
that is a completely different ball game. Yeah. One that I wasn't expecting, but one that I definitely needed. And it taught me a lot about life and a lot about people and a lot about forgiveness. So I look back at it as my saving grace.
You shared with me that there was a particular verse that you either learned about in prison or just got you through, and it's from Jeremiah. Did you want to share that?
Yeah. So when I was in county prison, there was a chaplain that came in, and I used to just go to get off the block. I wasn't really into God, didn't really believe. I went to church as a child, but my faith was not strong at that time. And I had felt worthless and hopeless. And like I said, I used my trauma as an excuse to keep doing the things that I was doing. And there was a lot of times where I sat back and I was like, why me? Why am I
Mhm.
going through all these things? And so I go to church the one day just to get off the block, and my ears perked up because the chaplain was talking about the verse Jeremiah 29:11, which is, I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for good and not evil. So I really took this verse as a sign. It was like the eye opener for me that my pain and everything I had been through was actually something that was going to guide me to my purpose. And that it was something that was actually going to gear me more towards the life that I was meant to have. And in that moment, I found purpose in my pain. And I felt like it wasn't over for me. And it was almost like God had showed me my worth in that moment. And instead of me being a victim of everything that had happened to me, he said to me in that moment, actually, like, I chose you to go through all this stuff. I
Right.
picked you because I knew that you could get through it. And I knew that this is what you needed so that you could be the best Chelsea that you could be, and you could fulfill the purpose that I put you on this earth for. And he chose me in that moment. And it was in that moment that my mindset shifted, and I started to see how things could actually be great despite my circumstances and despite my criminal charges and despite the addiction.
Oh my
So it
gosh.
was a glimmer
That
of
was
hope.
so beautiful. All right. I'm sorry I keep interrupting you. I get so excited. But you said something so important, and I don't want it to get passed on by. You said in that moment, and I'm going to paraphrase or maybe augment it, when you were ready to hear it, God showed you your worth. That is so powerful, Chelsea, and so transformative because up until that point, you may not have been ready to hear it. But when your soul was ready, it's amazing how grace showed up
Yeah, it's
and you
amazing.
got clean, right? You got clean.
Yeah, it wasn't an uphill battle from there. I definitely dealt with a little bit of imposter syndrome after that because I would try to do better, and then I would go back into those negative thinking patterns. So it was like I was trying to shift into this new identity, but I kept reverting back to old ways. So I can't sit here and say that it was like, yeah, I had that moment and everything was great afterwards. No, it was still a battle and a struggle every day to, fight the demons, fight the urge to use. And ultimately, God led me to the right teachers who were able to help me completely shift and step into that person who I was supposed to be. And I ended up in state prison. I did a long drug and alcohol treatment while I was in there, and my counselors at the time really helped me step into and see that there was so much more possible for me than I had even believed. And I remember on a visit that my dad came to see me,
Hmm.
and it was a really tough moment for me because he said, I never met someone so smart who could be so dumb and waste all of their potential. And
Ooh.
it
Ooh.
was like, wow, And it was like he was like telling me that he believed in me, right? But I threw it all away, and I that just didn't sit right with me, right? It
How
was
did you
kind of
take
like,
that? How did you take that?
at first I took it personal, but then I used it as fuel to almost prove him wrong. Like I had a mission to be like, no, dad, like you're not going to give up on me and my potential. I'm still smart. I still have all the potential that I was born with. I still have the same brain that I was born with. And I wanted him to see that, my past was just a snare. It was just something that it was a hiccup, and my future doesn't care about my past.
Ooh,
So
and that's so perfect because 2 podcasts ago, it was, our past does not equal our future unless we choose to live there. And so you just want to fast forward a little bit because you got yourself clean in prison. How long were you actually in the state prison?
just under the 3 years.
So that is no joke of a period of time.
No, definitely not.
In that time period, do you feel that you came out of that experience with a higher self-worth, or were you pretty broken afterwards? How did you come out of prison?
I came out with a much higher self-worth than I went in because I believe that there was a life greater for me without the use of drugs. Right. But I
Amazing.
was not at the level that I needed to be to fight real life obstacles. So I came out better than when I went in, but I wasn't at the level of self-worth that I am now. And I think it's a continuous journey,
Of
not only
course.
for me, for everyone.
What year was that?
2019,
So you get out in 2019, just in time for COVID to hit, right?
just in time for COVID.
In
Yep.
time for our mandatory pause that we don't want to speak of. And then in 21, you find Tony Robbins. Would you say that finding your way to UPW? Well, actually, let me back up. I feel like an attorney. Well, I am one. Strike that. Let me ask it a different way. Because you had your daughter in what year?
2019.
So
So
you came out of prison and you had your daughter in the same year.
came out of prison, got pregnant almost immediately, and
You
had
know,
my daughter. It happens. Girl out of
honestly,
order.
yeah, you are a girl out of order, but you know what? Honestly, I bet you that was the best thing that's ever happened to you.
Oh, she gave me a greater purpose than I could ever ask for. She's literally the whole reason that I keep going. And I know I have to set a good example for her.
Well, think about this, Chelsea. So you have this verse that comes to you. God speaks to you through this Bible verse that he knows the plans he has for you, plans to give you, to prosper you, not to harm you, to give you a future and a hope. Then you get yourself into state prison, you get clean, you find you find that your dad's like, you think when you look back on your life, you see these like road maps, these not road maps, guideposts along the way, right? It was that verse. And then it was going to state prison. And then your dad saying that to you. And then it was the birth of your daughter. And then you find your way to unleash the power within. What happened in that experience at Unleash the Power Within that changed you?
Wow, it opened my eyes. It stretched me. I remember being there and being in line waiting to get my lanyard. And I was with my sister and we were talking to these two guys. And at the time, I was a shipping clerk at a tool manufacturing company. And they were talking about their careers, and they all had really high level careers. And I just kind of like lied about what I did for a living. I told them that I was an executive assistant, and I was not, right? Because I felt so intimidated, and I didn't feel like I
Oh,
was good enough with this shipping clerk title, right? So I went to Tony Robbins, and I took a look at my life afterwards, and I felt so empowered. And afterwards, I was like, you know what? I can go be an executive assistant because I have the
yes.
skills, I have what it takes, and I have what it takes to work along vice presidents and CEOs of companies.
Boom.
And so I went to Tony Robbins, and I did the impossible and walked on fire, and I changed my entire mindset, and I boosted myself up and boosted up my confidence and used my physiology and my confidence to,
Yes.
get myself to where I needed to go. So we go to UPW in November, and a friend of mine who I met at UPW bought tickets to Business Mastery and was doing Business Mastery in January. So I put it on my vision board at the end of the year in December that I'm going to go to Business Mastery. I put it on there that I'm going to be an executive assistant. I put on my vision board, I'm going to be making this much money. And so I start taking action towards my goals. I start changing my
Mm-hmm.
resume. I start, adding new skills to my to my portfolio, things that I needed to know and know how to do to become an executive assistant. And lo and behold, I'm applying for these jobs, applying. So I go to Philly to do a virtual business mastery with this friend that I had met at UPW. And while I am at the event, I get a phone call from the company that I work at now that they want to do an interview. So at first I'm like, I don't know, I'm doing business mastery. Like, do I take, an hour out of my time, my precious time here and do this interview? And my gut feeling was like, you know what, just go for it. And so I did the interview, and they're like, wow, like, why is everybody screaming in the background? I'm like, I'm actually doing a Tony Robbins event right now. I'm like really big into personal development, and I love growth and I love learning. And that ended up being one of the reasons why they ultimately hired me. Right.
Okay,
And
we got to pause for a second because you're saying you're dropping so much gold, and I want to highlight a couple of things. And I want to rewind just a little bit because it was something that you said that was so beautiful. You said when you stepped into shoes that you weren't yet ready to fill, but you weren't going to accept that those shoes weren't meant for you. That's Christine's version of what you just said to me.
yes,
You said, I felt small, so I lied. Okay. But you could say you lied, or maybe you can say you manifested. We're going to go with manifested,
I'm
right?
going to go with manifest. Yeah.
You flipped a little bit. But the reality is, Chelsea, there's something in you, sister, that has never completely given up on yourself. Even though you struggled with self-worth, it's like your beautiful journey. It's like there's this golden cord of resilience and determination that runs through your whole story, from the divorce to the sexual assault to the addiction to the jail to the probation violations to the prison to Tony. Like, do you see it when you look at your life? Do you see the resilience? It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's something I have a lot of gratitude for because I feel like I've been given so much grace from my higher power, so much direction, and I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude that I am still even here on this earth, and that
Right.
I've been given the opportunity to even sit here and be in this moment with you. And I just feel like, I have been divinely guided along my journey. And that's what really keeps me going, because I know that there's something that is going to be, for the good of all at the end of this.
Right. And we've talked, I know we talked, there's a funny little story here because Chelsea and I actually recorded our podcast back in December or January, I don't remember, and it didn't convert. And I was just heartbroken because we had a beautiful conversation, but we were talking before we started recording today about how perfectly timed this is, because now we're in our focus on worthiness. And really, like, Chelsea literally went from prison to paradise, and it wasn't linear and it wasn't perfect. But something she just said is, I made a decision to start taking action towards what I was manifesting for myself. You were like the person who has this huge shadow, and you believe that that shadow, that huge shadow, that big life is actually yours for the taking. And you weren't going to accept a smaller life, even though you had to sometimes, I don't like the phrase fake it till you make it, but it kind of encapsulates what incantations are, right? We say things and we embody them. Like you said, you used your physiology and you walked on fire, and you embodied what you knew was your destiny, and you didn't doubt yourself out of it.
Absolutely. And I had to believe that I was worth that too, right? Because I
Yes.
think where a lot of addicts really get stuck is they don't believe that they're worthy of a better life. And not only do they not believe they're worthy, they don't think that there's a possibility, right? So I see a lot of addicts, and I was heartbroken this morning. I opened up my Facebook and saw a friend of mine from my past is missing, and
Oh,
she's still in addiction. And it really broke my heart because always viewed her as equal to me. She is just as smart, just as beautiful, just as much potential. And I really just feel like she doesn't believe that she is worth more. And
yes.
my message to every addict out there is you were born worthy. You were born worthy. You don't have to do anything. Nothing you did in your life affects your worthiness. You
Yes.
were born worthy, and you are worthy of a better life. You are capable of making better decisions, and there is nothing in your future that can be stopped because of your past. It's already behind you. As long as you keep moving forward and keep acting as if and
Mm,
keep making strides towards that better life, it's going to come to fruition. And when I take a look back at my life in the past 5 years, where am I going to be in 10? And that's what
yes.
Tony always says to us. You have a hard time gauging what you can do in a year, but you can never underestimate what you can do in 10 years.
Right.
So yeah, it's possible. It's possible for all addicts out there to have the job like I do, to
Yeah.
travel like I do, and to just step into greater versions of themselves. And that's my goal, to make all addicts and people who have criminal history to believe that they're worthy of living better lives.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I could just mic drop and, like, okay, and that's it for our podcast episode, because it's so beautiful. And what is also true is, I want to be realistic with our listeners, because it's not an easy road, right? So even though you have made massive strides in, your belief in your worthiness, it hasn't come without struggles, especially in your personal life, right?
Oh, yeah. I've faced a lot of struggles in my personal life, from being in abusive relationships to just daily struggles with, work and just finding a way to, oh, sorry, I've got a 5-year-old running in here behind me.
Not a
uh,
problem.
but yeah, there's always something that'll come up that'll take you or want to take you back to your old ways. And, life happens, but you got to keep moving forward.
So what do you do when situations arise that kind of call you back to that lower self-worth? Like, practically speaking, how do you show up in the Chelsea that you want to be when you feel that temptation towards, and I don't think it's drugs necessarily, maybe that's part of it, but just maybe in, allowing yourself to be treated in ways that you're not deserving of. What do you do with that?
Try to always really go back to God. I really realized, actually, after we met in January, I had shared with you I was going through some hard times. And
Mhm.
I know that I need to follow the pattern that I always followed. And what I realized was, every time I was in prison and every time I went through a hard time, that I always turned back to God and faith and my belief in manifestation and my belief in a higher purpose. And I leaned on that. And so now every time I'm feeling those temptations, I really just go to God about it. I really just uh, ask Him to guide me to the people who can help me get through these hard times, or the book that's going to help my change my mindset, or
Mhm.
I ask Him to guide me. So that's really what I lean on. And then I have a support system who stands behind me and believes that I'm, greater than all of the things that ever happened to me.
So it
And
sounds to me like when you're faced with these struggles, whatever they might be, like you lean on your tribe, right? You lean on your tribe. You lean on your habits, your rituals and routines, and you lean
yep,
on your faith.
absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
amazing. So let's fast forward and want to kind of bring this home a little bit. When how did you get yourself to Fiji? Because it's a no small expense, right? You said something earlier about $50 a week towards Fiji. Like, how did you make that happen? Is that something you manifested?
That is definitely something I manifested. And, I'm a big believer that manifesting is not just sitting back and being like, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Like, that to me is not manifesting.
Right.
I think that manifesting is you have to firmly believe inside you that it is a possibility and be confident that it's going to happen for you. But you also have to take massive action behind that. Right?
Right.
You can't just sit there and be like, I think I can, I think I can. It's just like you dreaming to be a lawyer. You had to go take the bar to get there, right? So it's the same with
Yeah.
manifesting your desires. So I made a plan, and I did not know how I was going to be able to pay for that at the time. At the time when I signed up for that, actually, the cost of Mastery University was more than a third of my yearly salary at that time. That is a lot
Wow.
of money for a single mom who's paying all the bills, but I made a plan. So I put that down payment on, and I took out a credit card, and I figured out how much money it was going to be for me every week. And every week I put that money down. And I think I actually paid it off after I went to Fiji. So I wasn't even completely paid when I went, but I'm completely paid now, and it was worth every penny. But yeah, just chunking it and making small, realistic, attainable goals for
Ooh,
myself.
yes, I love that.
And it really gave me momentum and keep me going. And I did it.
So you get to Fiji. Let's wrap up by talking about your Fiji experience because it wasn't until was it the very last day that you told your story to everybody?
Yeah,
Right?
it was the very last day. So another Tony Robbins seminar where I got there and I felt too small.
Okay, so
So
I want to really unpack that and I want to set the stage and then I want you to tell your story because
short.
Life and Wealth Mastery in Fiji is completely different than any live Tony Robbins event you'd ever attend. It is very small. It is very intimate, about 125 or so people, and then there's the staff, the senior leaders and trainers that run it. And you're in this small lodge for 8 flipping days. And it is, typical 12, 14-hour days, but you get to know people. You sit, kind of, I don't know, most people, humans kind of tend to sit in the same area. It's like when you go in the same pew in church, like people tend to sit in the same area and get to know some people. And it's really hard to hide. I mean, you can try, but I even after you and I had talked with the coconuts, which was probably a little over halfway through the programs, I didn't know it. I didn't know jack about your story. So I personally also felt small because we were staying over at Tony Robbins Resort over at Namali and a lot of the platinum partners were staying there, which is a really high level program of his. We don't belong to platinum partners. We're not at that level yet. But even I'm sitting here going, man, so many of these people in here seem like they had it all together. Now, is that how you felt?
Oh yeah, I was completely intimidated. First of all, I felt like all of the other people in the room didn't put a couple dollars away every week to get there. I felt like it was like one lump sum investment, so I felt like financially less than them. There was so many people who had great, amazing careers that I aspired to be like, and it really made me feel like I wasn't meant to be there. But it was a little bit of imposter syndrome. creeping in, because I know today that I fit right in to that room, and those are my people. But yeah, I remember on the first day, we were doing the first day of life mastery, believe, and they asked us why we were there, and we needed to share our story with someone else in the room. So they paired us up, and I get with this woman who tells me this great story of her amazing career and college and marriage, and she has these kids, and they're here to learn about making an investment. Long story short, I was like, man, this lady's gonna like roll over if I tell her my story. So I'm scared. So I'm like, I don't even know how to follow that. And I was like, I'm just really nervous to tell you. So I said, if I tell you my story, do you promise not to judge me? And she was like, absolutely. Like, it's safe here. I'm not going to judge you. And so I told her how I was addicted and I was in and out of prison. And I told her why I was there. And I was there to change my life and to get a higher purpose and to help other men and women who have been in my shoes reach a level of success and find their true potential. So, and you know what? She gave me the biggest hug after that. I mean, like, I felt so accepted by her that I was just like, okay, I'm safe with her. You know what I mean? But I was still a little scared of like the rest of the room. So as the week went on, like God always does, he sends you the right people at the right time. So
Right.
as the week is going on, I'm meeting people and I'm kind of disclosing like bit by bit, and I see that like nobody's really judging me. Like, these people don't really care about my past. Like, they care that we're all here together to make our lives better. So as the week went on, I got more and more comfortable, and so we get to the point in wealth mastery where we're doing our financial plans.
Oh, I hated that part.
I hated that part too. So I fill out the form and they pass out our financial plans, and our financial plan, like my financial plan when I got it back, like it did not align with like what I want for me. So it
Right.
said that it was like 30 plus years till I hit 1 million. Well, I didn't agree with that, and I wasn't ready to let a piece of paper tell me what my destiny was going to be financially. The same way I didn't let the piece of paper with my criminal history stop me from
Yes.
getting a job where I'm working with, executives of a company, which has now bloomed into an amazing sales role. And I'm working with people all over the country that know my name, that call me every day. And it's really great. So I I decided that I was not going to let that piece of paper determine my destiny. So that is when I stood up and I said to Lauren, I got this piece of paper, but I refuse to believe what it says. And
She had to love
was,
that.
yeah, I was like, I was a heroin
Mhm.
addict. I was in and out of prison, and I didn't let those things stop me from where I needed to go. And I'm not going to let this piece of paper stop me either.
Okay, what did
And
she say to that?
well, she was just kind of like, wow, what did you just say? Did you just say that you were a heroin addict? And she was like, we've all been looking at you all week long, and you
Mhm.
look like this girl who has it all together. And I realized that everybody was looking at me like I was this put together, rich, educated, they didn't believe what I had been through. And I got a really great compliment from someone afterwards, and they said, "You look nothing like what you've been through." And I was like, "Oh, thank God," because I've been through a lot, you
Okay,
know?
so we need to let that sit here with the listeners. I want to highlight that because so often, sisters, we as women have a tendency, I'm going to generalize here, to judge other women. I know, newsflash, wow, shocking, right? But here's this woman, and I've spent what, 8 days with her at this point. And I don't know if I looked at you like you had it all together or you didn't have it all together, but there's no way I could have ever known your story. Stories, we all have them. And when we share our stories, this is what we're doing here. We learn from that. We grow from that. We glean hope from that. And my sister here, my Chelsea, she stood up and with the most incredible courage in a room filled with 125 souls, you told your story. How did that feel?
It actually felt really freeing. It felt
Yes.
really freeing.
Yes.
And the outpour of support and love that I received after that was like, it was something that I've never seen before. It was like an eye-opening experience. And it made me realize that none of that matters. None of that even really matters. Like my past, it's there. I had a purpose. It taught me so much and it gave
Yes.
me, the gifts and the strengths and the abilities that I have now. But that doesn't matter to the right people. And keyword
Ooh,
there is
ooh,
the
ooh.
right people. The right people, right? Because what
Yeah.
is meant for all of us will always be for us, right?
Right.
And God showed me that the right people will come into my life and accept me. The right people will walk into my life and they will see my worth from the very beginning. The right
Ooh, 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 oh, gosh, that's beautiful. The right people, when they come into my life, they will see my worth. So to wrap this up, I've got a final question I'm going to ask you, but to wrap this up, as we sit here today, Chelsea, it's been since September. We're now recording this in March. Where would you say you are with your level of self-worth and how you show up in in your life and in your relationships? How would you gauge that?
If I had to put it on a scale from 1 to 10, I'd say I'm still a 7. And the reason being is because I still have moments where I slip back into self-doubt. And it's something that still to this day, I have to counteract those negative thoughts, right?
Right.
Because I have to realize that when doubt creeps in for me, I'm really doubting God. I'm really doubting the purpose and plan that he has for me. And when we doubt ourselves in situations, we're really saying, I God, you think I'm ready, but I don't think I'm ready. Right. So I've learned to just counteract that with, you know, if I wasn't worthy enough, I wouldn't be here yet, but I'm here. So I am
Ooh.
more than worthy of anything that comes into my life.
I love that. Oh my gosh. And I want to leave it there because that's so beautiful because we're all going to have moments where we doubt our worthiness. Like that's normal. But what we don't want to ever happen is to doubt ourselves out of our destiny. And this is a woman who on paper should not be this shining, gorgeous, beautiful soul that is sitting before me. And I hope you're watching this on YouTube so you can see my friend, so you can see her countenance and how she glows. And this glow isn't because she's got some great bronzer, which I'm sure she does. This glow is because she's doing the work, because she's putting in the reps. She's creating the habits and routines and rituals and new patterns for her life that are accelerating her self-worth. Yes, she's got some work to do. We don't want to paint a pretty picture here. We don't want to make this some unrelatable story. Just because you haven't been to prison doesn't mean you can't be imprisoned in a low self-worth. And we want you to hear from this beautiful soul that you are worthy, that your past is part of your purpose, and that your pain can be your fuel. I'm so proud of you. And I have one final question for you. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, I shamelessly ripped this off from Jen Hatmaker. She uses it with all her guests. She's an amazing podcaster, so why reinvent the wheel? And it's a question that Barbara Brown Taylor, who's this famous poet, I believe she's a poet, she asks, and it's what, Chelsea, is saving your life right now?
Faith.
You.
Faith. Faith gives me all the hope and all the purpose that I need, that the best is yet to come. So faith is my fuel and my power to do all the things that I do in my life. And as long as I keep leaning in on that, everything will keep working out as it should.
Beautiful. I love you. I'm so proud of you.
You too, kicking butt and taking names.
And you together, you and I, we're going to change the world, aren't we?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm so grateful that we could partner up, and I'm just very grateful that my story is going to be out there to help other women. So just want to invite anybody, if they ever want to reach out to me directly, if they have questions or if they're in a similar situation, you can reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram
Yeah,
at
where
Chelsea
can they
Alba.
find you? So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead and say where.
At Chelsea Alba 814 underscore on Instagram, or Chelsea Alba on Facebook.
And I will put those links in the show notes because she is a wealth of inspiration and hope. My friend Chelsea. Tell me that wasn't absolutely fantastic. Chelsea Alba is one of the coolest people I've ever met, and I'm not exaggerating. And I really hope you'll take her up on it. If you have any struggles with addiction and you just want some support, please reach out to her. I will put her links in the show notes. She's an incredible human being, and I'm so thankful she's my forever friend. So again, thank you for joining me for this episode of Girl Out of Order. We are on a worthy journey, and there is nothing better than hearing a story of somebody who has gone from the improbable to the amazing. Like the fact that she was an addict and imprisoned and worked her way up to paradise in Fiji. And now she is living a life of worthiness, and she is really fighting hard for her self-worth. I hope you are encouraged. I hope you were inspired. And I hope you heard that message that you, sisters, are worthy as you are. We're in this together, and I'll see you next time.